So tonight's story is Bus Fuss by Sandra McCuig and illustrated by Kathy Wilcox. This was one of Stuart and Emily's very favourite books when they were wee. Old Mr. Prowley takes great care as he climbs into the bus. Step by step he feels his way, placing each foot flat and firm. He cannot see his feet over the big bulgy bag he holds close to his chest. That's Mr. Prowley there. Mr. Prowley always sits at the front of the bus, far away from all the other passengers. Gently he places his bulgy bag on the seat, pats it down and keeps his hand on it for the rest of the journey. The bus driver often stares at Mr. Prowley. He wonders why a man who lives alone needs such a large shopping bag. But the truth is, Mr. Prowley does not live alone, nor does he travel alone. At the bottom of his bag, curled comfortably in a bed of old rags, is his little dog, Wombat, and there's Wombat curled up in the bottom of the bag. Wombat is a lazy dog who likes to have a snooze on the way to the shopping centre. But on the journey home, he's often too uncomfortable to sleep. One day, Wombat had to share his bag with a chilli chicken, some smelly cheese, a cruel corkscrew, a bag full of meat, a scrubbing brush, and a prickly pineapple. As he sniffed at the meat in the butcher's bag, the corkscrew spiked him, the brush scratched his tummy, the pineapple poked him, the butcher's bag burst, the chop slipped out, and he actually ate some of them. Mr. Prowley was very cross with Wombat. Pets who travel secretly must not eat the shopping, whimper, wriggle, bark, growl, sniff, sneeze, or scratch. Tigress understood all these rules. Mrs. Martin always feeds her a treat of tin sardines before they leave home. Tigress rides around in the bottom of Mrs. Martin's knitting basket. That's the knitting basket, and that's Tigress there. Mrs. Martin strokes Tigress as they wait for the bus, then covers her completely with grey fluffy wool. Mrs. Martin totters to the back of the bus. She holds her basket up high so that no one can see into it. She sits on the sunny side of the bus knitting a fluffy grey jumper, and when a playful paw appears, she quickly tucks it back under the wool. If Tigress purrs, Mrs. Martin hums, and they all travel along as happy as can be. But one day there was no room for Mrs. Martin to sit. There was nowhere for her to sit. All the seats were taken up. All the school children are on the bus. Mrs. Martin wanted to get off the bus, but it was too late. She checked her basket. One fluffy grey tail was hanging out. Oops! She popped it back. Then she glared at Mr. Prowley until he slid his lumpy shopping bag onto his lap. Oh my golly. Mrs. Martin said and Mr. Prowley steered straight ahead. They held on to their secrets tightly and completely ignored each other. The first sign of trouble was a long, low growl. Roar, then a hiss. The bag began to bounce. The basket began to rock. Tigress yowled and howled as she tried to claw her way out of the basket. Wombat wriggled and struggled out of Mr. Prowley's grasp. He burst out on to meet his tormentor, and groceries flew everywhere. Bananas and eggs and milk and flour. Mrs. Martin lost her battle with her knitting basket. The fluffy grey jumper sprang to life, scattering balls of wool. Tigress was out and Wombat was out. Oh no, dogs and cats. Look at all the chaos on the bus. There's hats everywhere and fruit everywhere, and oh my golly, what a mess. Wombat terrorised everyone with fearsome growls as he ran up and down the aisle. And the children squealed as Tigress leapt from seat to shoulder, from hat to lap. Look at the mess they're making. The driver stopped the bus and opened the door. Tigress flew out with Wombat close behind. She shot up the tree, safe at last. So there's Tigress up the tree, and there's Wombat down at the bottom. The passengers were stunned. Did we imagine that, they wondered. But when they looked around, they saw tiny scratches in school bags, torn newspapers, paw prints and flour along the aisle, a jam jar oozing, milk carton gurgling, tins rolling, and not one school hat on straight. A scandal, said Mrs. Martin as she popped the wool back into her basket. A disgrace, said Mr. Prowley as they slipped off out of the bus. Wombat and Tigress have become friends, and they stay home together while Mr. Prowley and Mrs. Martin take it in turns to go shopping. Mr. Prowley and Mrs. Martin often laugh together about the fuss on the bus. And that's tonight's story. And now you all have to get ready for bed, brush your teeth, and have a good night's sleep. Good night.